to the Weekly Wrangle. If you're joining live, thanks for stopping by and saying hello. If you're watching after the fact, that's cool too. In this Weekly Wrangle, I want to go over some art reviews and I want to talk about some updates with CG Forge and just hang out with you guys live. So if you have any questions or anything you want to add to the chat, feel free to do so. We have a few different art reviews. I just picked them at random and a couple of updates and things that are happening with Houdini. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But first things first, a few announcements. I am making a brand new, first time ever demo reel for CG Forge. So I want to know what sort of projects CG Forge has helped you with in any kind of capacity. So as an example, if you've watched Pyro 2, and that helped you create some kind of awesome fire effect that you used in a project. I'm giving away all kinds of prizes for people who let me know what projects that has helped you with. And so specifically, I'm thinking about making some custom hats. So if you want a custom CG Forge hat, I'm basically going to make a black hat like this, but switch out this logo for a CG Forge logo. And on top of that, I want to give away 4 months of CG Forge for free to people at random. So whether you're a beginner or you are a pro, let me know how the course is and how the material at CG Forge has helped your projects. And also, if you submit that to me, it's going to have a chance at being part of Side Effects' student reel as well. So lots of good things. You can have your work featured potentially by Side Effects. You can get a sweet looking hat. And on top of that, you might be able to win a few months of CG Forge for free. So it's a pretty good deal. If you have projects, send all that information to tyler@cgforge.com. All I need is your name. I need to know what sort of video file, or I need a video file or some kind of Vimeo link to the project that you made with the course. And I think that's about it. Let me double check my notes real quick. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, also, and then which course helped you achieve that project. So let me know those sort of things. I'd be happy to, put it all together. And then again, I'll pick people at random. I'll take a big old wheel and I'll spin it. And then people who submitted that project will get the prizes. So that's the first announcement. The second thing is that right now I am working on Vellum. And I would love your feedback as to how you can learn Vellum better. Or if you already know Vellum quite well, how you can teach Vellum better to, let's say, junior artists at your studio or something like that. With so much amazing free stuff out there, with Vellum and with just general tutorials and instructions, what I'm trying to do with my course is provide more exercises and ways to get your hands dirty with specific situations. Because I think where Vellum gets really difficult is when you actually have to run it through a scenario or a project of some kind. So let me share my screen and give you an example of what I'm up to here. With the new course that I'm making right now, we're going to have roughly 32 exercises in Vellum. They're like mini projects that do all kinds of interesting effects. So this is one of the effects. It's all based around constraints. So this is the distance along edges constraint. And the idea is that on top of explaining the constraints and all the theory of Vellum, this is going to be a massive scene file with all of these little challenges in mind. So if there's anything else when it comes to Vellum that you would love to see in a course or that can help you learn it in some kind of way, let me know, because that's also something I'm really interested in and trying to make great for you guys. But that about does it for the announcements with CG Forge. And let's get into some art reviews. So first thing is first. We have a few different projects here today. This first one here is from John Fanny. So this was a challenge that he did. He was trying to explore a wide variety of effects from rigid bodies, pyro simulations, and procedural animation. Let's go ahead and just take a look at what's going on here. Nice little force field, little explosion, slow-mo. Boom. Credit sequence. I love how theatrical that is. And right away, I just want to say that what happened here was not just a bunch of pyro and RBD and particles and all that. What happened here was it fit an amazing format for film work, right? This was almost like I was watching a little scene from the Avengers or something. It kind of had a style with the camera moves, with the imagery, with that slow-mo right there. And mostly when it did this, that is totally Hollywood right there with those different camera shots, contrast in motion, and then boom, like epic title of some kind. So that's really cool. And one of the first things I'll say about this is that it really did a great job at understanding the particular theme that this falls under, which is that classic VFX action-packed movie theme. So this was captured really well. It was really poppy with the cuts like that. And anyway, that stood out to me, and that was awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the effects, though. And you know what? I bet we can play this on slow-mo here. Let's try it. So let's play this at half speed and see what we can pick out here. Okay, so let's talk about the RBD for a second. One thing you'll notice is that when the robot bursts through the wall here, the vast majority of what we're seeing is tiny little bits of dust that have been turned into motion blur, which, if you look at reference, is exactly what happens if something goes through a wall. I think oftentimes when people do RBD, they're so focused on the big and the medium pieces that they forget that the vast majority of what you're going to see is tiny particles like this. And if you look at reference, it happens quite often. So this is capturing that quite well, which is nice. One thing I would do, though, is I would try breaking up this Voronoi pattern even more. It's really not bad. There is breakup, and this is better than your typical Voronoi pattern. But it still just doesn't feel quite like a plaster wall at the moment. And that's just because of the shapes of the medium and large pieces. Now, you could try getting away with some Booleans with this. That works okay. Usually, if you have Booleans, you can get away with that maybe once, and then you fall back to Voronoi after that first fracture. So that could be something to consider here. But I do think that that would be my biggest constructive critique, is maybe just taking a different approach to that initial fracture, because these shapes, again, it looks like Voronoi to me. It doesn't necessarily look like plaster or stucco or whatever that wall is made out of. But I love the small details, and also the compositing and lighting is quite nice as well. We have the smoke, so that gives that kind of dusty aftermath of a RBD sim, which is really important. And then as we go through here, force field, boom, it takes our attention right over here immediately, and that's pretty sweet. Now with this force field, though, something that doesn't make too much sense to me is that we have a force field we can see right here. It has a nice refraction, a little bump map to break up that refraction, or maybe even a little displacement to bend those rays so it looks like frosted glass, which is great. But I don't know why it's only up here and not the entire length of the robot, because he's getting shot down at the leg, but we don't actually see a force field down there. So that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me about that force field. That was a little bit strange. But yeah, that could be, I don't know, just maybe a stylistic choice or something. Let's take a look at this next part here. He gets hit by a big old bomb or a missile, and it immediately goes to slow-mo, which I think is awesome. So we go like that, very dramatic. Whenever you have contrast in motion, that's what makes action-packed films really cool. That's what makes it fun and exciting. you'll notice that if you ever watch an action movie, it's not just all fast. I mean, sometimes the shots are fast and everything's fast, but usually there's that contrast of things going slow and then fast and then slow again. And so that's what this is doing right here. And I think it's a really great use of slow motion. As far as the fire goes, I think that this could be improved a fair bit. It feels to me more like a glowing smoke at the moments. Whereas I think it would be nice to shade this in a way where you could see licks of flame, or you could see more of that individual shapes beginning to occur. So for my personal taste, it's a little bit too fuzzy right there. But you could fix that up just by changing the shader and clipping off some of the emission values so that it has harsher edges around the shapes. And so a lot of times, like I'll take black to the very top of the ramp, and that will remove some of this glowy stuff so that you have glowy stuff and then nothing right next to it. And again, that creates that visual contrast, which gives us shapes that make it feel a bit more like fire. So that's one thing I would say that could potentially help that pyro right there. But again, great execution overall. I think it's a really strong project and definitely very inspiring. So great job there, John. It turned out to be an awesome shot. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. So this one here was done by Garrett Smith. And this is a short preview for a waterfall scene created in Houdini and rendered in Blender 3D. Now it looks like this is a preview, so this may not be a finished work. So I'll keep that in mind. But what's cool about it is that this was rendered in Blender. It's a fluid simulation, and I guess the first thing to say is that it's not always easy to bring that much data from one software to another. So I'm not sure exactly how this was brought over or how this was transferred over to Blender. Probably just a Lembix or something of that nature. But, you know, I think that's, first of all, a thing to congratulate you on because, you know, that stuff's not always easy to do. Anyway, what we have here is a cool waterfall. I think, well, let me first of all talk about what's cool. What's cool about it is that we have things breaking up that shape. A lot of times when we think of a waterfall, maybe our first instinct is just to have water go over a surface and fall down to the ground. That's actually kind of a hard thing to do because when water goes over the edge of something and it just falls, it's hard to get a bunch of detail. And it's also hard to get the transition from it looking like water to droplets to potentially a cloud or some kind of gas. Because that's often what happens with waterfalls. If they fall for a really long time, as they go straight down, it has this metamorphosis from, you know, river-looking thing to white particle-looking thing to eventually a gas. So by breaking this up, it's good because it forces more collisions, it forces more detail to arise from the water sim. And again, what I've said before about water sims is that the collisions and the environment matter a lot because that's going to eventually be the basis for a lot of the detail, for how things splash up, for how things break up when they collide with things. Okay, so that's really good, and I think that that was recognized here to a really good degree. One thing that could probably improve this is just a bit more motion blur. You know, if you ever try to take a picture of a waterfall, I don't know if you've tried this, but if you try taking a picture of a waterfall with a really fast shutter speed, it actually does have a almost alien look to it where, you know, if we pause this, it's like tiny little droplets and it's really complex. But in this case, I don't think it's really helping you as much. I think honestly to get really good motion or to have a decent amount of motion blur really helps because our eyes don't perceive this much detail in the real world when it comes to a waterfall. We kind of generalize things into strands or streaks when we look at waterfalls. And so that's why this feels a little bit unnatural. If you were to take those particles and again, just add some motion blur, that's going to mimic how our eyes typically perceive the motion of water because it stretches it out. It kind of generalizes the movement. And so I almost think of it as taking a brush and kind of smudging it like an oil painting or something like that. So just a little bit of that I think would go a long way in this situation. And also, if we take a look at the shading on the water, we do have this blue through some transmission, but I think it's a little bit too neon blue. It almost looks like dyed water. So if that is transmission that you're using, you could just take the depth further so that it only turns to this color once we've gone further into the water. Or perhaps I would rely more so on your HDR for lighting it and getting the different reflections for the breakup of color on your water instead of relying on transmission. So I think those two things could really as well push this to the next level. And yeah, I mean, overall, it sounds like this is not complete, so I don't want to speak too quickly, or I don't want to judge too quickly on this. But it's definitely, I think, on the right start. And one last thing, because I just always have to say it, pay attention to the backdrop. Don't just leave a solid color there. Do a little something there. It makes it way more presentable. Okay, that was a lot of stuff there, but hopefully, Garrett, if you're watching, hopefully that can be helpful. And again, great job rendering this out in Blender and, playing around with this. Okay, so let's go to this next one here. This is by Neurotim VFX 2. It's called Heisenberg's Dream. We have this little constellation of blue crystal meth. So I think it's a fun idea and really cool. I mean, visually really cool. I think one of the first things that stands out is the lighting. We have dramatic lighting, which if you're going for that Breaking Bad Heisenberg thing, makes total sense. You want to have some dark, some light. You want to make it feel like, some kind of dramatic window is peering onto this thing. And, well, that's working really well. If you wanted to make a similar thing, or you watching, if I guess you're watching this and you want to make something like that, it's really easy. All you need is an area light and a gobo. So an area light and an image to make shadows cast by the gobo. I almost think of it as you have a light and you put a little filter on that light, which is the image, and that will block out areas and cast a shadow. And then you just take that light, put it on the ground like this. So here's the ground, here's the area light. There you go. Now you have this kind of dramatic thing, and it works really well. That's a very simple thing, but it adds a lot. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the effects here. First of all, love how there's a wide variety of shapes, wide variety of sizes. It's not just big chunks, medium chunks, small chunks. We have a nice blend of things going on. And also, I like just the general concept of, making these different shapes. And I know at first this might seem like a super complicated thing to do, but I think one thing you have to realize is that a lot of this can just be potentially driven by particles. And I don't know exactly how this was made, but I'm just kind of guessing off the top of my head. If you can make these shapes and this behavior with particles, you can make this behave with RBD. And so all you really need is the forces that make these different shapes come alive. And then once you have those forces, you just run it through an RBD sim, things roll naturally, and you have what you need. So yeah, really cool project. I think that the camera cuts are nice. They're choppy, they're fast. A lot of times too, one thing that can take your projects to the next level is when you cut really fast like this. We have this zoom outs, we have this close up, slow-mo. Things kind of have like a rotational camera move. We have a close up. And so a lot of times if you just have a simple effect and you want to make things more exciting, just switch up the camera shots and make it more snappy. Really just cut from one shot to the next. Like this, and you could take one effect and turn it into a cinematic sequence like what we have right here. So that's a really great execution of all of that as well. Okay, so all in all, I mean, I don't really have too much to critique here. Perhaps a little bit more variety on the blue color, maybe, maybe not. Again, kind of getting a little bit picky there, but I think that this turned out really great. So well done here, Nero. Okay, so I also want to mention that if you haven't seen this yet, we have Intagma, who has come out with more stuff with material labs, or not material labs, with MLOps. So I believe Paul and Maritz have been, or no, it's not Paul and Maritz. I believe the folks in Intagma have been working at building AI imagery, AI tools to put together here with the new MLOps update. So if you're into AI, I just want to say that there's a lot of great stuff here to check out as well. And definitely keep updated by going to Intagma's channel because there's a lot of great new things. All right. Let's see. We have one more here for today. And yeah, I don't really know which parts of this was made in Houdini, but this is, again, the combination of Blender and Houdini, which is interesting. We have a nice peaceful meadow, beautiful clouds and sky. I don't know if that's 3D clouds. It kind of looks like it. Definitely could be. But this is beautiful. Great shot. A lot of things are happening here that are excellent. First of all, let's talk about the camera. We're down close towards the ground. We have a wider angle. What that does is it makes it feel like a big environment. And I always tell people, think back to when you were a kid and everything felt really big, right? You walk into a room, you go outside, everything was huge. A large part of that is because you were just close to the ground. You started off like only 2 or 3 feet tall, right? And then that leaves you always looking up at everything, and that's why everything feels really big. And so when we have our cameras and we want something to feel big, like an environment, we can do the same thing. We could take a camera like this, put it close towards the ground, and then also exaggerate that experience of looking up and around like this by taking the camera angle wider. And that's why this feels like a big outdoor environment. And so this was done really well. Another thing that makes this feel big and open is the fact that we have many layers, right? We have our foreground layers of the fence posts and the grass. We have another layer here of the path. We have the silo. It goes back, so we have lines going back into the frame with this path. Whenever you have the borders of something, treat that as a line that's creating direction in your composition. So we have lines going like that and going like that, which again is pushing us towards the vanishing point, which is way back here. We have trees, we have another silo, we have more lines right here with these power lines going back. So again, everything is trying to be focused over here, and those lines are trying to get you to go inside the frame. And then we have another silo, additional things in the backdrop. All of these elements start getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we start seeing more elements because there's more complexity of the things we can see in the distance. And eventually, we have a little bit of atmosphere until we're all the way in the back where we have the castle. And I also want to point out, and I think this was intentional, that the atmosphere did not break up the silhouette of the castle or of, it looks like a town or a castle, whatever that is. So this silhouette is very clear because all the lines are pointing towards it, and it's not being covered up by volumetrics. It's only just towards the bottom here that we have that. So just a light use of that volumetrics. It's not like an even haze, and it still achieves the same effect while maintaining more detail, which is a really cool way of doing that. I always say if you have volumetrics in your scene and you want that atmosphere, break it up. Make sure that you're not losing detail and that you're not just muddying everything in the process. And this is a really good example of how you can do just that. Also, take a look at the clouds here. line, line. We have lines everywhere. Look at these lines pointing all the way towards one point here in the composition. So that was just really well done. And again, if you're looking to improve some of your art skills, it's really just about being aware of these kind of things. The clouds look awesome. They're very stylized. I love the daytime render right here. It just feels very cozy. It has a nice little bit of bloom. Notice how we have light going around that that windmill, a blade right there. So a really nice, appropriate use of bloom, in my opinion. It's not overdone, but it's still there and it's making everything feel cozy. And what else can I say? I think this is really good. Areas for constructive critique, though, this feels a little bit goopy to me. It just feels like the bump map is being pushed too far. Maybe the scale isn't quite right for this material. I do think that could use some improvement. It's not so bad when it's back here, but when it's closer to the camera, it actually kind of falls apart a little bit. And that's something you'll commonly find with texturing, by the way. What works close to the camera does not always work when it's far away. And this is a great example of that. This is all right. This, totally fine. And I bet you they share the same exact map or the same exact shader. So you might want to break up that shader or add more detail right here in this case, more smaller detail. You can easily do that with the noise in some ways. But that would be, I think, one of the main things I would pick a bone about with this particular shot. And the grassy field is a nice addition. Let's see if there's some wind. Yeah, there is. And the wind looks nice, just a calm little breeze, which feels appropriate for this kind of scene. Okay, so really great stuff today. This again was done by Nikita Belos, or Belus, either way. And there you have it. So again, send me your projects, you guys. I really want to see how CG Forge has helped you. Again, if my courses have helped you with anything you've worked on, let me know about it, because I want to make an awesome CG Forge demo reel, celebrate your guys' achievements, and I think it'd be a lot of fun, and offer some really sweet prizes as well. Okay, so shout out to Mitch. Thanks for joining in today. And I think that about does it. If you have any questions, or if you ever want to, if you have any questions, or if you're just curious about Houdini stuff, send me an email anytime, tyler@cgforge.com. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I hope you have an excellent day.